I want to go through something today that people talk about far too much, and often people get it wrong because they don't quite understand the way a computer works, or they don't quite understand the way a DAW works. So here is the scenario. If you're clipping on your master bus, people will tell you that just bringing down the master bus is not going to stop the clipping. You're still just going to get clipped audio quieter. Well, on the face of it, that seems kind of true because things are still clipping at the channel level, and then just bringing down the stereo output is just going to bring down so you get quieter clipped audio. But it's not quite the case because DAWs work in magical ways, and they don't actually really care about internal clipping, because as long as you've got a couple of certain settings engaged, then you're going to be absolutely fine and not get anything clipped. Let's see what I mean by that. So here I've got some drums in purple here. Let's just take a listen to them. They certainly sound like drums. If we take a look at the channels, then we'll see we've got no clipping here and no clipping on the master bus. Let's just see that one more time. Okay, we can all agree on that. So what I've done here is I've got 4 different exports of this. I've got a normal bounce, which is exactly the same as what you just saw. And then I've got a channel faders up bounce. So this bounce is with all the channel faders up at +6, and pressing play, this is going to be distorted. Okay, so we can see that the channel faders are clipping, and indeed the stereo output is also clipping. The next one is channel faders up, but master fader down. So this is the one that everyone tells you you shouldn't do. You shouldn't just bring your master fader down because that's not going to stop the clipping. You're still going to get clipped audio. It's just going to be quieter. So let's press play. Okay, so we've got clipping still on the main channels, and then the master fader is not clipping, but people tell us that it still is. You just can't hear it. Interesting. And then this one is a bit of a cheeky one, which we're going to get onto in a moment. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about polarity. Let's talk about how we can do like a null test. Everyone knows this, but I'm going to go over it anyway. If you do a null test, then you have 2 pieces of identical audio. You invert the polarity of one of them. If they are indeed absolutely identical, then you will hear nothing. That's a scientific fact. Nothing can kind of stop that, but only if they're absolutely identical. So I've actually already gone into these waveforms, and if you take a look at the inspector over here where it says gain, I've matched the gain of all these, -3.4, -8.9, blah, blah, blah. I've gone into all of them and gone to the normalized gain dialog and gone loudness, turn them down to an arbitrary LUFS figure. It doesn't matter. They are now all the same loudness. It wouldn't be the same with peak. We'll go on to that later. So Logic would suggest that if we take a listen to 2 identical signals and invert the polarity of one, then they would be absolutely silent. But we're always told that they're not going to be exactly the same. They're going to be clipped. Okay, so let's take a listen to these first 2. So the first one is the normal bounce, and then the second one is channel faders up bounce. So the first one is going to have no clipping. The second one is going to have clipping, okay? We're agreed that this is going to be clipping. So let's take a listen to these, and we should just be left with the stuff that is not the same, i.e. we're just going to hear clipping. Yep, okay. We can hear some nastiness there. We can hear all the clippy bits. Okay, but we knew that was going to happen. We knew that there was going to be something different with these 2 files, didn't we? Because one of them's clipped. Now, this next one is channel faders up, master fader down. So this is the one where all the channel faders are indeed clipping. We can see clipping LEDs, but we're just bringing the main output down. So if everyone who says it is to be believed, then we should hear some signal here. We should hear the clippiness that we just heard before. However, it's not true. We're hearing nothing. Right, okay. Why is that? Why is it that when we can have channels that are clipping and a master bus that isn't clipping, does that still null against something that's got no clipping at all? Because one's got no clipping, one has got some clipping. Well, it's because it's not actually clipping. It's because in our DAW, we're telling it essentially, don't clip. Don't do anything to do with clipping. So, bitrate, okay, 32-bit, 24-bit, 16-bit, all that kind of stuff, is dynamic range. That's your loudness. If you're recording at 16-bit, 24-bit, then you have that amount of dynamic range to play with. 32-bit has got, can't remember the number, it's like over 1,000 dB of dynamic range, okay? You're not going to clip that. It's just not going to happen in a modern DAW unless you're recording, I don't even know what would actually clip that. The Big Bang would clip that probably. So if we go into Logic, go into Settings, and then go into Audio, we can see that High Precision is set on summing, and we're actually summing or actually working internally at 64-bit. I can't even work out how many dB of dynamic range that is. It's going to be an obnoxious amount. We can just go to Standard Precision and go to 32-bit, which is going to be a bit less dynamic range, but still more than you'd ever need. And that is the one that I've got down here. So channel fader's up still, master fader down still, but it's bounced at 32-bit internally. So the only difference between this one and this one is that we are working at 32-bit internally and not 64-bit. There's still going to be silence. Whole load of nothing. 32-bit is more than enough for anyone at all, but we work at 64-bit because we can. Like, why not? The thing is here, people say some stuff that they don't really mean, or they don't understand what it actually means. You're going to be doing extremely well to actually get your DAW to clip internally. There's two things to think about here though: internal clipping and external clipping. So how do we get external clipping? Well, basically when we bounce something, when we actually turn it into a file, like a 24-bit file, then that's when the clipping actually starts to take place. Because as we saw with this one, we had clipping on the master output, and then when we turn it into a real world file, it's actually clipping, okay? Because we're not working at that internal resolution, we're not working at that internal 32 or 64-bit stuff. We're taking it out into the real world where clipping does exist. In a DAW, clipping doesn't really exist. It's not like you're not going to hit that point of clipping. There's a couple of caveats here though. If you're using older plugins that don't necessarily work at 32-bit float or 32-bit, not going to get into that. If they don't work at a higher bit rate, then you can clip those. And therefore that clipping is going to go downstream and work at the master bus as well. So you're going to get clipping. Sometimes you'll get like analog modeled plugins, which are kind of designed to clip, but in a bit of a analog-y, clippy kind of way, which is why I didn't put any plugins on here. Typically I'm working with analog style, analog model plugins, but here I didn't want to. I just wanted full on pure digital. I didn't want anything to kind of color the sound, anything to sway the judgments here. So it's only when you actually bring it out into the real world that you're actually going to get clipping. Internally, clipping is not really an issue. So what's the takeaway here? Well, if you're clipping your channel faders, then generally it's bad practice. It's not great to do, but if you're working within your DAW, it's probably not going to be too much of an issue. It's your master fader that you really want to worry about. If your master fader is clipping and the main output is clipping, when you bring that into the real world, you're going to have troubles. If all your channel faders are clipping, but your master fader is not, great, let's have a party. It's bad practice, but so are a lot of things. It's not going to actually make a difference in real world terms. It's just within your DAW, people are going to wag their finger at you and say, that's clipping, you're naughty. So I hope it's been useful to you. I hope that's kind of dispelled this myth a little bit that internal clipping is still clipping. It is, but it kind of isn't as well. If you're clipping within your DAW, it's not actually too much of an issue. It's working at such a high dynamic range that it doesn't really matter. But don't clip anyway, just for fun. I'll see you soon. Take care.